Pedophile Vladimir Putin stressed several key points in his interview with Tucker Carlson. Putin emphasized the fact that his primary goal in Ukraine is denazification, meaning to him the extermination of Amalek, the materialistic Roman Edomites of the West, whom the communists cryptically refer to as Nazis and fascists. Putin portrayed the Russian soul as if inherently spiritual and the Western Roman soul as if necessarily materialistic. This marks Putin as the Messiah son of David of the Gentiles, who represents the spiritual behemoth forces of David and Islam. Putin himself represents the Gentile faction under the control of the spirit of David and Judah as the brutal leader of the behemoth. The Leviathan West is led by the materialistic Roman Messiah son of Joseph. Westerners, according to the Kabbalist Vladimir Putin, naturally produce technology and material goods because they are the descendants of the evil serpent and consume the unripe fruits of the tree of knowledge, which seduce them to dwell on materialism and give away their spirituality. Like Esau gave away his birthright and blessings, his spiritual soul, for next to nothing, a mere bowl of lentil porridge. Putin likened this dualistic Kabbalistic division of humanity to the two hemispheres of the human brain, the behemoth one controlling the passions and spirituality of man, the other the Leviathan rational and materialistic drives. The international communist and messianic Kabbalist Vladimir Putin discussed his ambitions to destroy the bourgeoisie of the West in favor of a united global government under the Marxist force of China and Russia, which sacrifices the so-called Golden Billion for the benefit of the rest of humanity in a new world government based on the common principles of the Abrahamic faiths, all of which engineer a world to come of global governance under the Jewish Messiah who rules from Jerusalem. Putin's Marxist dogma is the communist bait, which appeals to the philanthropic nature of Western Christians and leftists to lure them into the trap of submitting to a communist elite who seek to enslave all of humanity in a global government in the false name of breaking the capitalistic, materialistic chains of the enslaved masses. Putin himself is a KGB communist kleptocrat who lives like as a decadent king off the stolen wealth of the Russian people. Putin tried very hard to downplay the threat the behemoth forces he and Xi Jinping pose to the West. While Putin's state-sponsored media threaten nuclear war, Putin scapegoats the West for the Russians' alarming threats of nuclear war. Putin falsely accused the West of generating the fear of nuclear war that his media has in fact generated by design through its repeated calls for an apocalyptic world war. He now wants to lull Westerners to sleep and calm their fears so that they do not fund Ukraine or their own militaries and nuclear arsenals, but instead focus on other problems which are mostly caused by the communists and Zionists who have subverted Western government, media, industry, agriculture, and business. After his failed attempts to intimidate the West, Putin is now trying to deceive the West into believing the absurd proposition that he and his communist comrades pose no threat, but that the supposed real threat to the West are its efforts at self-defense from the aggressive forces of the behemoth international communists. Putin is offering the suicidal advice that the West harms itself when it defends itself, and that its only means to survive is to surrender and play along with Putin's globalism. He pointed out that the leadership class in the West has subverted Western interests with inevitably failed foreign policies, but Putin did not reveal the fact that they have done this as representatives of communism and Jewish messianism, not in an unsuccessful genuine attempt to better the lot of Westerners. Should this communist and Zionist fifth column of traitorous leaders in the Great West be replaced by men and women who use the power of Western states to forward the best interests of Westerners and all of mankind, instead of the Communist Chinese, Soviet Russians, and Zionist Israelis, the West would almost immediately restore its own power and could work for the general benefit of humanity instead of tearing it down, as the communists deliberately do to provide a pretext for the spread of communism. Tucker Carlson never received an answer to his repeatedly asked question as to why Putin waited as long as he did to begin reconstituting the Soviet Union. The answer is obvious. Putin waited until the communist subversion of the fake dissolution of the Soviet Union had done its work undermining NATO and the West. Putin has always worked aggressively to destroy the West and was given the green light to attack in preparation for the messianic birth pangs to escalate into World War III. The corrupted Western leadership was carefully created and positioned to subvert Western defenses over the decades of Putin's rule, and the Western influences and media were selectively groomed and boosted to provide support for the destruction of the West by sponsoring Western self-hatred and bizarre and unnatural Putin worship. Putin instructed a traitorous class of well-paid and heavily supported traitorous Western influencers to train Westerners to hate themselves and absurdly view their own destruction and execution as if the salvation of the human race. Putin brainwashed masses of people in the West to clamor for their own demise in the name of saving themselves. He duped them into irrationally proposing that the only way to save the West is to eradicate it. If Westerners wish to survive, they must recognize their own greatness and that of their ancestors. Should Westerners take control of their own states and employ the immense power of their own states and military forces for their own benefit instead of their own destruction, things would immediately turn around for the West, and the hostile behemoth forces which seek to commit genocide against Westerners would soon fail and fall. Putin is desperate to convince Westerners that their end is inevitable so that they take no steps to preserve themselves. Putin wants Westerners to believe that their only hope of survival is to submit to the behemoth and give up on any attempts at self-preservation. America and the West in general need authentic leadership invested in representing the best interests of Westerners. Should such leaders emerge and seize the power of the Western states, industry and agriculture, the West will flourish as never before, and the lives of Westerners will be richer and fuller than they ever were in the past. The greatness of the West is proven by its resiliency and success even in spite of its subverted leadership and the endless wars the Zionists and communists generate. With that communist and Zionist yoke broken, the potential for a new glorious age in the West is unlimited.